Recording starting. Yeah, can you guys please introduce yourself? Chad Hendriks, Jack Middleton, Vitaliy Musiyenko, and me. Chad.
Yeah, great. I'll start it. Yeah, my name is Chad Hendriks. I'm the president of Experience Associets. We've been dealing with truck driver recruitment since 2012, and then specifically immigration since 2020, where we've been working through and getting people their green cards and getting them jobs over in the United States. So it's been a fun ride to work with the governments and to figure out all the details of everything, but we're finally getting there. So that'll be my introduction. Jack, why don't you go next?
Yeah, my name's Jack Middleton. I've been with the company since 2021. That being said, I've got a background in recruiting, sales, and transportation. I am currently the carrier relations and recruiting director for Experience Associets. I handle all of the intake calls with every candidate that comes through the process, regardless of where they're from. So I've got calls with drivers every day. Most of the time they're in other countries, but yeah, happy to be here.
My name is Vitaliy Musiyenko. I'm a CEO of Northwestern Alliance Inc., working with Balkanic community for about 10 years, working officially with Department of Licensing, State of Washington, helped about 2,500 people received a first Washington license, first ID, open LLC company, because they're working with three accountants and one CPA. All of them is Russian speaking, working with workforce development, State of Washington, and a couple more contracts. Previous, I was working with Melinda Gates Foundation, a private fund, and a couple more federal grants. And I was actually a paralegal for Community Center of State of Washington. So I have a little bit knowledge on EB3. In EB3 business, since it was introduced to USCIS since 2018, and I was working on contract with 3 immigration attorneys previously on EB3. And I'm still, half of Chicago actually knows my personal cell phone right here.
That's great.
Okay, guys, can you tell me, Chad, what is the conditions for the drivers, your guys' requirement for the company, for EB3 or?
Yeah, and I think what's important to know is there's EB3 and there's EB3 Other. And so there's two different situations with that, and whether you're in the country or out of the country. So EB3 is something where we say that we're requiring 2 years of experience or more as a truck driver, and EB3 Other is less than 2 years of experience. Now, the important piece between those is it can affect how long it takes the process to go through the whole process based on which one you're in, because they do the government prioritizes EB3 before EB3 Other, and it changes, and it can change month to month. Just to give people an idea, when we first started in 2020, both of those programs showed that they were current, that there was no backlog, and then all of a sudden 1 month it went from no backlog to there's a 2-year backlog. So obviously it didn't become a 2-year backlog overnight. It was just that the government wasn't reporting a backlog until one day they were reporting, and it was 2 years. Now, as of this recording, June 27th of 2024, we just got out the new visa bulletin for July, and all of a sudden they're almost aligned again, where EB3 and EB3 Other from the visa bulletin is almost the same dates for what they're processing based on when we filed your paperwork. So it's hard to trust it because it varies over time. So the preference, though, is still to apply for the EB3 with 2 years of experience or more, because it has been faster in the past, and maybe that could change in the future. Now, where that can be a question of what do we need to do, if you're in the States right now, and let's say you're on some type of visa like a U4U, temporary protective status, asylum status, like the U4U and TPS, like there's deadlines for those things and how long they last. And so if we are doing the EB process while you're on a U4U or TPS, we want to try to make that as fast as possible to make sure that you don't get into, hey, my current visa is going to be expiring. you'll have to leave the country while we finish the EB process, which would be a big pain for everyone. Now everybody has the assumption that U4U and TPS would get extended just like other things have in the past, but there's no guarantee. So it's this weird gray area where you don't know. Now Asylum is a whole nother ballgame because we've had people on Asylum and they've been on Asylum for 10 years.
I know.
So who knows? Yeah, right. And now if you're new to Asylum, if you're brand new on Asylum, you won't get work authorization until 6 months in. And so that's how that could be affected, why you'd want to have the 2 years of experience or more. Now, with most of our clients, we're doing both. We're filing for 2 years of experience or more, and we're filing paperwork for less than 2 years of experience so that it can fit anybody's needs. Now, and the experience can be overseas. It doesn't have to be U.S. experience, or it could be a combination of both. So people have to understand that. The only one weird part with experience is if you're working for ABC Trucking Company, and ABC Trucking Company is going to be your petitioner, and all your experience is at ABC Trucking Company, they don't let the experience that you have at the petitioner count as the experience to put on the paperwork. I'm not really sure why they do that. Maybe there's a really good reason for that, but you have to have experience at other companies than the one that's petitioning for you. It's kind of a weird thing.
Yeah.
Now, so if you're in the States, we're going to go through a different process. It's called an adjustment of status process. If you're outside of the States, it's consular processing, meaning you will go to the U.S. consulate overseas, you will interview with the consulate officer there, versus if you're in the States, you'll stay in the States in there. And so that's the difference between the two. Right now, we're experiencing the EB3 program to take, if you're overseas for sure, it's taking about 3.5 years total as of right now, and obviously
for the
that
people
could
out
change.
of the USA.
If they're out of the USA, yeah. So it does change. So in general, I feel like those are the important things to know about the EB program. Is your qualification is based on your experience in that job. In this case, if we're talking truck drivers, it's that you've either been in the US and have a US CDL, or you have a foreign equivalent in the other country and you've been driving trucks in another country is how you get that experience.
One more question, because I have some people asking me, people who has CDLs expired, they already came back to Europe or Balkans or any country out of USA. Can they apply? So they already have previous experience in trucking in USA, so they can apply maybe.
Yeah, it's just based on past experience, and there's no deadline for how long ago that past experience was. The only thing that comes into play there would be, will the U.S. company want to hire you if your past experience is from 10 years ago, that kind of a thing. Right now, what we've been doing, most of our work has been in South Africa. That's where my partner is. That's why I was there. It's also English is a common language there, so it makes it really easy for U.S. companies to hire out of there. And we've been requiring 10 years of experience or more just to allow a driver even to interview with a U.S. company. Now, that's not a government requirement. That's just about what we've been doing internally. And the reason we've been doing that internally is there's so much demand to come to the U.S. that we can have a higher standard. So it's not required, but it could be in there. So that's how that works.
But what's going to be a requirement for the U.S. guys who has already experience in U.S.?
If they're already in the U.S., it feels completely different. And the reason why it feels different is you can go work for the petitioner right now while the paperwork is being filled out. And what that does is it gives the U.S. company a lot of confidence that you're already helping them make profit from driving for them, that they're willing to pay the fees for the paperwork. For the guys that are overseas, it's different because they're not going to start working for the company till they've been through the whole 3-year process and we've had all those costs, and it seems riskier that way. So if they're already in the States, there's much less of a requirement. They just have to meet the minimum hiring requirements of the U.S. company now. So, and U.S. companies all have different requirements. Some people can take brand new drivers. Some companies cannot because of insurance reasons. So they will treat you the same, they have to treat you the same way as they would treat any U.S. citizen. That's the requirement. From a pay standpoint, from an offering standpoint, it has to be equivalent. They cannot use this as a way to reduce their labor costs and try to pay people less and, essentially do the whole, make you a slave or a servant to their company. That's not legally allowed. So same requirements as a U.S. citizen is what they have for anybody else they're bringing on.
And we don't
Okay.
work with any companies that treat drivers in the EB3 process different. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the hard part. A lot of people that may have experiences of others telling them what they've been through, and there are other companies in the States that they don't really care what company they're working with, as far as the employer. And then drivers have gotten to those companies and what they were told was not what they were doing. They're driving different equipment, they're having a bad experience, they're not getting the miles that they were promised so that their pay is less. There have been plenty of bad experiences. And because of that, and knowing that, the companies that we work with right now, everybody we require below a certain turnover rate. So you have to be less than a 40% turnover rate in trucking to qualify to work with us, which, most people know, like the average turnover rate is almost 100% in trucking, and that varies. So, and actually, even though we require less than 40%, most of our companies are actually in like the 23-25% turnover rate, which is actually the same as if you took all companies in the United States, no matter what industry it is, that's the average. So these are really high quality companies that are treating their drivers well and paying them well enough that drivers stay. So that takes out some of the risk for the driver themselves because they're working with good people.
That's great.
I was
That's
smiling
great.
just there because I didn't know that there were actually trucking companies that had this low of a turnover rate until I came on board with this company 3 years ago. We might actually work with all of the ones that have the turnover rate like that, but
Yeah, they're hard to find.
Drivers stay, they're happy, they're paid well, and I would be willing to get any one of our drivers that are at these companies on the phone with any potential candidate just to have a conversation about how they're feeling about it. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think, Jack, you remember we spoke last time about the Swift, how they, how they
Yeah.
pay low and yeah.
Absolutely. And that's
Actually, I checked it yesterday, top 50 trucking companies on number 2 after Asylum, which is interesting for me. And Veraya on number 3 in the list.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so some of the companies that we work with are getting those top trucking awards. Now, I will say this, I don't always trust the top trucking awards because I've been through that application process. To me, the only thing that matters is driver turnover. Right. Does a driver stay with the company or not? The awards that go out there, they take in a bunch of other factors like, are they using technology and are they upgrading equipment and all this stuff? And I go, all of that's important, but at the end of the day, if a driver's happy, then I think you're a great company. And so what's interesting is a lot of our companies are on the list for top driving companies, but I would almost they might actually be higher on the list if you only counted turnover. And I think that's the only thing you should count.
But most Chad drivers from outside were looking for the companies by numbers who hired on EB3 visa. It's why I had a conversation yesterday from a young Canadian CDL driver who asked me immediately, Vitaliy, can I have HR manager contacts who will accept me? I said, no, it doesn't work like this. Boyan had a question before, if you have experience with H1B companies, I know for last 2-3 years, many trucking companies were doing H1B for 3 years, and you can adjust inside US to EB3. Because Boyan, I received an email from somebody from Serbia yesterday who exactly asking, he looked like received a job offer on H2B, and he asking for the future if we can adjust him in US on EB3.
Yeah, there's a difference between the H1B and an H2B. There's also drivers that might have come over to the States on an H2A. Some of those allow for, so the H1B allows for dual intent, which means I can be on an H1B, I'm in the States temporarily, and at the same time I can apply for permanent residency. There are other ones like H2B and H2A that are not dual intent. So they're not meant to be on an H2B and an H2A and also apply for permanent residency. But once again, there's a gray area. So because we have drivers that are in our EB program that apply for an H2A and get approved to come to the States. And the consular officers know they are applying for the EB program. They know it, and they still approve it. So what we found out is we work with another attorney too. That's a really super large firm, and they came back and they said, yeah, it's not prohibited, but it's risky. They may not get approved because it's up to the consular officer. You go to the consular interview. Yeah. Well, and what my thought on it is that if you've been to the States multiple times, so you've had multiple H2Bs or multiple H2As, I would think as a consulate officer, you say, look, this person, they've been to the States multiple times. They've never overstayed their visas. So I'm going to trust that this person's not going to overstay their visa this time. And it should be that way, because if you really think about it, if I'm an immigrant who applied for permanent residency, why would I do anything to screw up my chance for the permanent residency? To me, as soon as you apply for an EB visa, you are more likely to not overstay your temporary visa, because that would screw things up. So I think the government has it wrong there, but it is a gray area where it's up to a consulate officer on whether or not they approve you. And so is it complete luck? I don't think it's complete luck, but it could be. Like, there could be a situation in which an officer says no for whatever reason, because really their job and their meeting with you might only be 10 minutes long. You might have a 10-minute meeting with a consulate officer, and the officer goes, I don't really trust that person. And they could deny you only because they had the sense that you weren't trustworthy. Now they do this all day, every day. So it's normal for a person to go in there and be nervous, right? For them to see someone who's nervous. So it's based on the questions they ask and the answers you give on whether or not they are trusting what you say.
And I will say that we haven't personally seen that scenario where a consulate officer did deny anybody, one of our candidates, but we do make sure that we tell any of our candidates that are currently over here on an H2A, H2B,
that it's possible.
That it's possible, and it's a risk. Yeah. We tell them, the honest truth and leave it up to them. So,
yeah. Guys, tell me, what about Canadian guys? Some people, they have passports and also permanent residence, and they're calling me, hey, how can I come on sponsorship visa or EB3, or they can just switch to some USA programs or something like that, because they already drive America, all the time, cross-boarding.
Yeah, they're doing a lot of cross-border stuff. So, for that, an EB visa is perfect. It might take a while for them to go through the whole approval process, but there's really no reason for them to get denied. They have the experience. They already have, because of NAFTA, the ability to drive in the U.S. It's a perfect opportunity for anybody on the Canadian side who wants to go over. The only time that I've had a Canadian driver say, well, I really don't want to do that, is because there still are some fees, right? There's still like the premium processing fees that they'll pay and all that kind of stuff. And I had one guy say, well, I don't need to pay those fees. Like, I can just go find somebody who'll be my petitioner. I doubt that he has,
yeah.
But, so there's still costs to it, and what you have to pay.
Do you know approximately how much it costs?
Well, the premium processing costs, they just increased. So they could continue to increase that over the years. So what's hard is, some guys who were in the program waiting for the Department of Labor time frame to get done, which right now it's taking about a year to get that part done. They're in the middle of that, and all of a sudden the U.S. government increases the price by a lot. I think it's $2,500 now is the premium processing fees.
28 already.
28, yeah.
28.
Yeah, so it's gone higher on that piece of it. And then there are some fees that we charge for just the finding the employer, the actual process of setting you up with that and handling those pieces of it too. Typically what we've done so far in the past with the South African drivers is we will wait till they get over to the States, have their job, and then charge them a weekly fee over time, so that they don't have a big upfront cost all the time. Now, we've done some other things where now with guys that are in the States already, what we've said is, hey, to be in the program, to make sure it's not a risk to anybody, pay the premium processing fees upfront, kind of like as an enrollment fee into the program. And then, once you're actually hired and working, we'll charge that weekly fee to pay for whatever else afterwards too. So there's different ways to set it up. There's also different situations where we've had some guys say, "Hey, can I pay more so I can pay it off faster? Can I pay a little less?" So we talk to individual drivers about their situations, what they need to do.
Boyan, I suggested a young driver from Canada yesterday to find a fiance. K1 visa, come right here, marry, get in CDL school, now we can talk.
Yeah.
This is easier and quicker way for young people.
I know.
Yeah, and that's the one thing with anybody that's overseas. Part of the process is you have to get over to the US and go through a CDL school and get your official US CDL. There's a lot of cost to that piece of it. So that's hard because, so if you're overseas, let's talk about costs with that. You get over to the States, you go through the CDL school. There's the lodging and board. So we cover like the food and the lodging at some places only cover the lodging. So there's costs with getting your CDL itself. When you're thinking about family members, that's another important thing that's come up a lot. So with family members, there's really two options if you're overseas. They can accompany you right away. Well, and right away means within 6 months of their medical expiration. So they don't have to come immediately when you come as the driver. They could come 5 months, 6 months later, but it has to be within 6 months. The other option is follow to join. Follow to join doesn't really have an expiration date on it. You could follow to join 2 years later if you wanted to. The problem with that one is as soon as you decide that your family member is going to follow to join, the form that is filled out for that right now is taking 20 months for the government to process. So, if they come later, it's going to take longer. The other issue with it is the cost of it. So if they're overseas, let's talk about overseas people. There's a couple costs that people don't usually think about. You have to go get a visa medical, which means you have to travel to wherever that's available. Like in South Africa, they have to either go to Cape Town or Johannesburg. So there's costs just to traveling to get to your medical. Then there's the cost of the medical itself, which varies by country. In South Africa, it's about $550 US, 10,000 Rand. So there's the cost of the medical itself per person. Then there's the cost to get everybody to the consulate interview, right? You got to get to that. There's a visa cost of $345 US. There's a visa approval that comes after you get to your approval of $220. And then there's all the travel and flight costs. So that's where what we've done is we've helped cover some of those costs, and then, but not for the family members, but we've covered it for the driver. So you could project as family members, you might have to save up $2,500 to $3,000 US right now if you're overseas per family member because of flights and everything with it. So that's where a lot of people are choosing to do the follow to join because they want to get to the US, make US money, be able to save up for their family to come. The only other cost that's associated with follow to join is that follow to join form, the I-824. There's an additional $590 filing fee right now. So it ends up costing you more if you're going to do follow to join versus having the family come with you right away. But if you don't have the money, you don't have the money. That's kind of the world that we're living in right now.
But usually, okay.
Ooh, I should add one more thing. Children are the other piece of the family. Children can age out. They have to immigrate before they're 21. 21 is the age limit for children. So if you're waiting on that 824 and that takes 20 months, and the whole process already took 3.5 years. Now they take out the I-140 pending time, but if we do premium processing, that's only 2 weeks. If you do standard processing, that's 8 months. So you can kind of backtrack. You can say, well, if I'm going to have my kid accompany me, they have to be under the age of 17 to make sure that they have enough time before 2021. If we're going to do the follow to join, that could add 20 months. They might have to be under the age of 15 to make sure that there's not an age problem for that. So that's where it's hard because it's based on the visa availability date, and that changes. And so you can't absolutely know all the time that there's not going to be any problem with your children aging out. Now, if your kid's 13, 12, 6,
if they're
no
young.
big deal.
Should be okay.
But it should be fine. But if they're older than 17, it could be an issue. We have to actually discuss that and talk about that. You could go down the road afterwards of family visas, but those also have costs and a lot of time associated with family visas and everything with there. The other option would be is let's find your kid a job.
Right.
Employer who
Yeah,
will
in
be a
Starbucks.
petitioner for them, would be the other piece of it. So,
Yeah, something like that.
yeah.
The Europe guys, they're asking me what kind of equipment you guys have, and actually, what year of the trucks? Are they new equipment, dry vans, reefer, flatbeds?
Yeah.
What they're gonna
So
drive?
pretty much every client that we work with all have newer equipment. They're 3-year-old trucks or newer. But the type of equipment varies. So we do have some tanker clients that are running tanker. I don't think we have any flatbed currently, but I'm probably going to be adding some flatbed clients pretty quick. These are actually like Eastern European owned companies that are running flatbed or car haulers. That we'll probably be adding pretty soon. But a lot of it's dry bed, and there are some reefers. We do have one company that also does like environmental cleanup stuff. So it's not only truck driving, it's also like handling some other pieces of it, which is kind of in the tanker realm, but it's a different type of service that they offer. So it varies as far as the equipment. But what we try to do is if you have experience as a tanker driver, then we try to get you to a tanker company. If you have
Right.
experience just as a dry van, then we try to keep you with the dry van company and keep it very consistent. That way, the driver knows 100% what they're doing and they never feel like they're out of place. And the company is 100% sure that the driver is going to be qualified and understand what to do. Because there are nuances to driving a tanker. Obviously, that's different than anything else. Or flatbed is definitely different work and different type of labor requirement than dry van.
Yeah, I know.
And I would also say a lot of our clients, most of their stuff is like drop and hook.
Oh, great.
There might be some unloading, handling of freight, but overall, most of them are like drop and hook type stuff. Yeah, and most of them, what's interesting in the U.S. for the length of time that you might be out on the road, we do have companies that are home daily, and we have companies that are long haul. So there's differences in preferences on that for drivers too. It just depends on where you're going to be at. And the problem with the home daily companies is you have to figure out housing right away. So if you're coming over as a driver, now we got to figure out where you're going to stay immediately. For obviously the long haul guys, you can live out of the truck for a while until your family's going to come over, and you got to figure that out then. So there's some advantages to being long haul outside of just getting more miles and all that kind of stuff. But even the home daily companies, they're really good companies. They still pay obviously decent enough that they have low turnover and all of that. So it just depends on what the driver is looking for.
That's great. That's great opportunity also.
Mhm.
And tell me, so how long they need to stay on a road if they're long haul drivers?
Yeah, so that's the
They
interesting
know.
piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's actually some of the companies right now, because they're operating in the US and they're trying to cater to US drivers, long haul is like a 2-week out on the road. Which seems like nothing to some of the overseas
Nothing.
guys. They're like, oh
Yeah.
man, I've been out on the road for 2 months.
Yeah.
So what's happening with some of the companies, they're going, hey, look, if you're able to come over here and stay out longer, that's better for us. But of course, their normal structure is to have people out for only 2 weeks. So if you really only wanted to be out for 2 weeks at a time, you could. But obviously, most people that are coming over here, they're like, I need to make as much money as I can. I got 5 kids. 5 kids times $3,000, like in a spouse.
I know.
I need to save up $18,000 just to get my family over here. So they're working every single day that they possibly can. What some guys need to know is that these companies also do run by the rules. So you are, where some guys might be used to changing their logbooks and really they're running 90 hours a week. But the rules, obviously, in the States is 70 hours. You can't go over that. And so in some cases, the company's like, wait, you have to stop.
Yeah,
You
they're
can't
not
go
going to
over.
keep their turnover that low if they allow them to do that kind of stuff. So
Yeah. So there is some with that. Like you're trying to make as much money as you can for staying out longer, but you still have to follow. These companies do actually follow the rules in that case, which is why it's part of their mentality of treating drivers well. So for a while,
And-
it might seem like a punishment to some guys where they're like they'd want to run more, but in the long run, it is better.
I know.
I thought the same thing. Like they might feel like it's, they're going to be, I don't know. I don't want to be ran ragged, but I'll tell you, the guys that we currently have at these companies, that stay out as long as they possibly can because they want to make as much money as they possibly can are some of the highest earners in the company as far as money goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I like trucking specifically, because you could be a brand new driver to a company, you know, maybe you're experienced coming overseas,
Mhm.
but you could immediately be some of the top earning drivers in a company just because you're willing to work more than the US counterparts.
Yeah.
So that to me is exciting, where it's like you're not limited just because you just got here to the States. Like the pay can be really good. So that's why I like this industry.
Can you tell us what is the pay?
Yeah, well, and that's where it varies. So we have everything from like the home daily guys who, right? If this is the hard part. If you're home daily guy and you work the Saturday, like which one of the companies that we work with, the Saturdays are optional. It is, if the drivers volunteer, they can work the Saturday. If they're working the Saturdays, they're making $80,000-$90,000 a year. If they're not working the Saturdays, they're making $66,000 a year or whatever, because those drivers are taking all that time off. And you can get all the way up to like, you know, some of the tanker companies, you know, driver might be making $110,000. I mean, the interesting thing about this is the companies are typically hesitant to tell you what the top pay is because they don't want to take the chance of disappointing a driver because they didn't get that. Now, usually what happens is it's in the driver's control. The driver gets to control how much they make, but then they still blame the company if they don't get that much. It's like, yeah, but you took every Saturday off. Why, you know?
And you turn down every other load.
And you turn down all the loads, you know, where some of the drivers, some of the companies right now, the drivers are taking expedited loads, and expedited loads pay significantly more sometimes. And so they could be making a ton of cash on this expedited work. So, and that's where, you know, the difference is, like if we bring in a car hauler, car haulers pay really, really well. They can make, there's also the difference between being a 1099 employee and a W-2. So we could explain the difference between that. If you're in the States right now, technically you can work for a company on a 1099 and still go through the EB process. Once you get your green card though, you have to be a W-2 employee. You have to be hired as an employee, because that's what the petitioner, the employer, that's what they're saying to the government. We're going to hire this person on for a job. So that you have to be a W-2 employee. Okay. Now, you don't have to be a W-2 employee forever. But the suggestion, so this is where a gray area comes in again. The suggestion is you have to stay an employee for at least 6 months to show that you had the intent and that the company had the intent to really hire you as an employee. Otherwise, you could get accused of being fraudulent, that you weren't really doing this. Now, legally, as soon as you have your green card, you're a legal permanent resident, which means you can make whatever decision you want. You could be like, I want to be an owner operator. Right now, day one, I want to be an owner operator. And if you could convince the company to make you an owner operator, you could do that legally. But the idea is stay at least 6 months as a W-2, because then that avoids any questions on whether or not you were fraudulent when you filled out your paperwork, or if the company was fraudulent, that they really had that intent. So,
and the reason,
just to piggyback on that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Reason, Boyan, when you will be applying for naturalization in US, this question can be raised.
Yeah. Are you going to be an employer? They will ask in the visa, in the consulate interviews, like, who's paying this? Who's paying for your immigration fees, right? The company's paying for the immigration fees, but they want to know that that's happening, because otherwise that would be fraudulent, because if the company's charging you, for all these immigration fees and for the lawyer fees, right? Because there's a lot of lawyer fees involved in all that stuff. Premium processing is different. The travel fees, the CDL school, those are all different than immigration fees. That's why that can get charged to the driver. But like the attorney fees cannot be. That has to be paid by the employer. So they'll ask things like, when you get over there, where are you going? Well, I'm showing up in Marinette, Wisconsin at Viria. Okay, who's doing the training? Well, they're doing the training. Are you getting paid right away? They're looking for a situation in which somebody's lying is really what they're looking for. And we
I
just want to make
know.
sure. Yeah.
And who is paying for the school, for tracking school? Also companies, right?
Well, in the end, it really is the driver. So like even if you're a U.S. citizen and you go to one of these schools and they say, we're going to pay for your school if you stay with us so long, right?
yeah,
And if you
contract.
leave, then you.
Chad, I don't mean to interrupt you here, but the meeting is going to end in less than a minute because I have the 30-minute situation. If I make you the host, will it continue?
I don't know.
I'm going to
Go ahead and make the host.
If not, and we get cut off, gentlemen, I'll just send out another
okay.
invite.
Me a host, I have professional Zoom I'm paying for, so we can talk for a couple hours, no worries.
Yeah, I
Okay.
have it as well. It's just Jack
I'm the only
does it.
one who doesn't, so yeah.
Can be next, Jack.
Right.
Um,
Go ahead.
so that's so just in case we'll kind of get back into here, you can splice that part out.
Here we
So
go
yeah, you were
back.
asking about the costs of CDL school and stuff. Really, in the end, the driver ends up paying for that. So that's where the weekly fee comes in. So right now, I know what we've been doing right now is a weekly fee of $65 a week goes towards paying back for all of that piece of it. Now, that's for the guys in the States, that if they're already in here and they're already working for the company, $65 a week. What we've done in the overseas guys, once they start working, so we don't charge them fees ahead of time. So they're going through the whole immigration process for 3 years overseas. When they finally get to the States, they start working. We charge them $130 a week. But what happens is half of that gets refunded back to them when they complete the 3-year contract. So
Okay.
what it does is it protects the company a little bit for paying for the CDL school up front by charging more up front. But then if you complete everything and do what you say you're going to do, then you get that 10,000. It basically ends up being $10,000 back at the end of that 3-year period. So it's like a savings account during that time, but it makes everybody feel comfortable that you're going to stick around and that there's not a concern there.
Like security deposit, something like that.
Yeah, it's basically a security deposit.
Mhm.
You're prepaying some of it, and then it becomes a bonus when it comes back. So, which will be
Great.
helpful.
And tell me, how long is contract on the companies? It's 1 year or 2 years?
What they're looking for is 3 years. If you're
3.
talking about how long the driver's going to stay with them, yeah, they're looking for a
Yep.
3-year
3.
3-year commitment. Yep.
Okay. Let me see. And they can be owner operators, so they can start like company drivers first couple of months, and after that, can they be owner operators?
Yeah, so a lot of the companies have those options. Not everyone does, but I'm trying to think of, does anybody not have that as an option? That's a really good question. I think almost everybody, not everybody does. Some of the tanker companies, I don't know if they offer owner operators or not, Jack. But yes, and essentially,
They do.
okay, they do. I think every company has it except for maybe Clean Harbors, which is the large environmental one that I was talking about. I don't know if they have owner operators because of their specialized equipment, but everybody else pretty much does. So yeah, they could work as a W-2 employee for that first 6 months, once they get their green card, and then they could switch over to, if they want to be an owner operator, if they have a 1099, lease purchase program. A lot of companies have those as options. So then they have more options to choose what they want to go
And
do.
even if they, if a driver is currently in the States and let's say they're an owner operator currently in the States looking to get their EB3. We have a driver right now at one of our carriers that leased his truck to somebody else to come on board as a W-2, but put somebody else in his truck in order to, maintain, the asset. So
Yeah,
our carriers are pretty flexible with the drivers. So
yep.
Perfect. How long is training? When they came in USA, training is a couple of months after they get CDL.
Oh, really? I mean, so how we operate now is when they arrive and they go to the CDL school, those CDL schools will keep them for 5 weeks. So during that 5 weeks, they'll go through the full training program. Now, what's interesting about that is you'd say, well, if someone from South Africa's got 10 years of experience, why do they need to come
Yeah.
and do 5 weeks of training school? And it is, in some cases, it's both and. We've had such good safety records. So like the very first pilot program that the company did was with Schneider National. Huge company, right? They went through, but they didn't go through Schneider's school. They went through another school, and they went through 5 weeks of training. And what was interesting is drivers would say, I've been a professional driver. I've driven 15 years. What is some US CDL school going to teach me? And we've
Mhm.
actually had the comment where he says, I didn't think they'd teach me much, and I was wrong. They actually felt like they got a lot out of it, which was surprising to me as well. Like, I wouldn't think that that would be the case. Now, depending on where you're from, you may drive on the left side of the road versus the right-hand side of the road. I know in South Africa, like, they can't make right turns on red lights, so they're very hesitant to do that in the States because
Europe, same.
you can go to jail or you have to bribe, or you end up having to bribe the police officer in South Africa to get out of it, like those kind of
Or
things. So
they're
they're
gonna
like
cut your hand,
hesitant to do that, right? There's been other things where, like even just the signage and terminology, have been a big piece of it. Now, is there some leeway in there? I would plan on 5 weeks being at the CDL school. But if like someone comes in there and they show all the skills and they just go through everything, like one of the CDL schools that we work with, they'll graduate them faster out of it too. And then once they get to the employer itself, most of these employers will have like a week orientation. They'll have a week-long process that they'll put somebody through, but it's not a month. It's not months of like another training piece of it at that point. So it's really mostly the 5 weeks of the CDL school, and then they'll hit the ground running pretty quick once they get to a company. I mean, some of the companies, their orientation is 2 days, and they'll be out on their own.
And they get
Which is
direct deposit
another
every
reason why it's
Friday.
much faster for the guys that are already in the US that we can place at these companies because they just hit the ground running. So,
Yeah, they don't have to go to a CDL school. They already have their CDL, so
yeah, they can just start the next week.
So we can only hire people who already have CDLs in USA. I'm
Yeah.
talking about it. Mhm.
yeah.
The only caveat with that is that the minimum requirements with all the trucking companies that we work with, as far as drivers currently in the US, they have to have a minimum of 1 year.
1 year of CDL. Oh,
Like
okay.
if they've got 11 months, I mean, I'm not going to tell you to send them to me, but send them to me. I can
Mhm.
probably
Yeah.
make that work. But
Yeah, because the issue is for us is most of the companies aren't taking brand new CDL drivers because they're not the mega carriers that have they're self-insured and all of that stuff. So what's happening is we are having drivers contact us because they've been working at FedEx Ground or they've been working for England, and so they have their year of experience and now they're looking for a petitioner. Now they'll come over. So that's been pretty common at this point.
Mhm. I
Yeah.
have some people, they drive like straight trucks right now, maybe 50 of them. And they asking, can somebody like pay for the CDL school and like do the green card sponsorship, something like that? Is that possible for some companies to do it?
Potentially, the reason I say potentially is we're in contact right now with a company that does the Class B straight trucks, and so they're talking about doing the same thing where either they'll hire them now and get them their EB based on a Class B, so we just fill out the paperwork differently. Instead of requiring a Class A, we require a Class B, and so then they go through the same process just for a different job. So there's that possibility too, which is, I would say, is a high probability that they're going to go with the program. So there's that. If you're talking about like, will they go to one of our companies that only has a CDLA program, and will that company sponsor them? Probably not at this point. And the only reason is because there are so many drivers in our program right now that are in that same situation overseas. So they're already, they already have hundreds of drivers that we're already interviewing and going through that process. So it's not really much. The benefit if they're in the US is if they can start working for them right away. That's where they rise to the top of the list. They're like, oh, you're already in the US, you already have your CDL. You are at the top of the list now. You are before even the overseas guys. So congratulations. You just skipped the line.
Point I have answer. If we're Ukrainians or Russians and we just came in US, Workforce Development State of Washington has a couple grants so we can cover half price or little more. Like I told you before, right? With help of Ukrainian consulate, one of our CDL schools in Tacoma, they gave more than 120 licenses last January free of charge because state covered it.
Great.
That's unknown anywhere. I don't know of another state that has done that. So, that opportunity that's an amazing opportunity.
just like
we
that,
are
now I
living
know
in
why the drivers that Vitaliy sends me are from Washington State.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Washington State is #1 by the money for last 8 years.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm next to the Boeing. It's just my office 5 minutes away from the Boeing.
Well, the upside is that the carriers we work with, believe it or not, are okay with drivers that live in the U.S. with a CDL that live in Washington State. So,
Oh yeah, the best state for immigrants right now.
I was just happy we had a carrier that was able to take drivers that lived in Washington State. So.
Oh, amazing! Good news.
Yes.
Yeah.
And tell me, guys, a couple of more questions. They're asking, does they get direct deposit every Friday or company hold checks for on 2 weeks?
Most companies are weekly, right, Jack?
I was going to say it varies. It's honest to God about 50-50. Some are bi-weekly or weekly, but all of it's direct deposit. Yes.
Great. Also, they're asking for the owner operators, but maybe they can ask you that personally if they get job. What is the costs per week? You know, like cargo insurance, trailer rent, escrow. What they have?
That's definitely going to vary company to company. And currently we don't have, most of our experience with owner operators are from the guys that are currently in the US with CDLs. So it's a very specific situation when we talk about pay, as far as the owner op 1099 side. Most, if not all of the candidates we have coming from overseas, other countries, going through that long-term EB3 process from the very start are all W-2. So it's going to vary company to company, but I'd be happy to get into the specifics, once we have a need to do that. So
yeah, the normal process is they'll talk to Jack first just to make sure, is there any specific situations that they have with their current visa, and do we have to figure anything out beforehand? But then they will be set up with an interview directly with the company, and so they'll be able to find out all of that information up to date, make sure that it's accurate, and so that's how we would handle those questions typically, is saying, well, we just need to set you up with an interview with Voyager or with anybody else, and ask them directly, like make sure that it's in the offer.
Perfect. And approximately how much they pay per mile and how many miles they're going to drive per week for driving?
That's an interesting question. Now, I've actually started, not in our clients yet, but I've starting to see companies reduce their pay rates to existing drivers because of the freight market right now, which is a little like crazy to me to think about, like, oh, you got used to making 65 cents a mile and now you're making 60 cents a mile. Like, that's gotta be painful. So it obviously is going to vary, and who knows what it's going to be in another 3 months. But Jack, as far as range on like cents per mile, a lot of it's around that 60 cents per mile, right? For like W-2 stuff.
Yeah, we don't have any company paying less than 60 cents a mile.
That's great. That's great for W-2. That's great.
Yeah.
And we don't have a company that's averaging less than 3,000 miles a week. So for the over-the-road company.
Perfect.
Obviously, the home daily stuff is completely different. Yeah.
You're not getting 3,000 miles a week home daily.
Yeah, but home daily guys, they pay by the
you're hourly.
Flexible hourly. Oh yeah. Okay. I think we cover all questions, guys. Let me just check.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of any other specific situations or anything that we've been dealing with. I mean, I will say this: if you have some type of situation like I said, like the other guy, his wife's on a J1 visa, and that's how he's in the States, and so we have to figure out those situations individually. So if you have a situation, we'll look at that and figure out if we're able to help. A lot of questions that are coming through, and maybe Vitaliy, if you have any information on this too, a lot of questions that we get are guys that have come over to the States, they crossed the border from Mexico, and now they're trying to apply for asylum.
Yes, I know it. We have lots of Russian-speaking guys there now.
Yeah, and so that's difficult because it's one of those areas. Yeah, the asylum process is because you're in the States, you arrive at the border and you're like, hey, I need asylum, right? That is the process. But you have no idea if you're going to get it. To start that process right now, before you have work authorization, because even once you get authorization for asylum, you have to wait another 6 months before you could even get work authorization. So there's no guarantee in that situation that we can actually help you if you've crossed illegally and started in that. Now, if you have asylum, if you've already been granted asylum, now we can talk. And do you have your work authorization? Have you been working? Do you have your CDL already? So there's a lot of questions, but that's a common one that's coming up a lot right now.
Boyan, so Chad, speaking about affirmative asylum, not defense asylum.
Mhm.
I have a couple attorneys, one Michael in New York, who's doing a defense asylum, right, and helping guys after I-40 petition approved, right, to stop the process of deportation. And I have here in Tacoma the defense asylum attorney. Her name is Vicky, my partner. She's practiced law for 28 years. She told me, same for Mexican drivers or any employee, as soon as a 40 petition will be approved, she can do a motion to the judge, and she mostly works in Seattle and Portland, so she can take them off of deportation line and place with USCIS. And same for Ukrainians, right, with TPS or another 12 countries. This is another possibility. The person who came through even illegally without CBP1 app, right, she can do it, or attorney who has experience, right? As soon as they file for a TPS, they come through under jurisdiction of USCIS, and they taken off of a deportation list. Because right now, with this situation, terrible before Ukraine, my country, I can say each judge has between 4.5 to 5.5 thousand cases to see per year. So of course, they would like to take off and pass to USCIS, instead look into, specifically if you have children's US born, right? If you have married already with green card holder wife, something like this, they are happy to pass to USCIS.
Yeah. And of course, with all of that, that's more work, extra costs, there are extra
Yeah.
lawyer fees. So you got to be aware of that's going to happen if we're in those special situations too. But for most people, it's obviously worth it because they want to stay in the US. And so sometimes you just got to do whatever's required.
I know.
And Boyan, with your experience in the US, being here, in the Midwest for 7 years,
Mhm.
you're going to be able to utilize your contacts that you have, people in that, U4U, Asylum, whatever status that they're in, send any and all of them our way. As long as they've got a CDL and they've got a year experience, we'll make it work. So.
But
Either
Boyan,
Mhm.
please, I'm value community. Many of them, I told you before, they listen jokers, not us.
Mhm. I know.
I'm American, 27 years, right? So we would like to give a real information, and we doing free of charge. Jack doing half hour free of charge, right? And after HR manager, 15, 20 minutes, half hour. We try to give the real information, right?
Yeah.
Not to listen somebody in Miami who's working from his boat.
I know. I know.
Yeah, and one thing that I've ran into with quite a few of the candidates, that Vitaliy has sent me so far, and I've placed most of the candidates that have been in the US that he's sent my way. It seems to be that there's a lot of candidates are self-conscious about their English speaking abilities, and I'll tell you that they speak better English than most of the drivers that are US born in transportation. They need to not worry about that at all. As long as we can have a conversation, and I've never not been able to. Right. Just make sure that they know that I'm a friendly when they get on the phone.
I know.
I'm not here to grill them. I'm not here to, make them feel uncomfortable or, any kind of way. Just let them know that it's going to be an easy conversation. And as long as they can get through a conversation with me, they're going to be fine.
Also,
we're going to bring up the fact that they don't speak English well. They can say that to me, but they can't say that to anybody else.
Immigration.
Whenever I talk to a driver, and they will always say, "I'm sorry, my English is not very good." And I'm like, it sounds fine. And you know what's more impressive is that you're multilingual and I'm not. So congratulations. Right. I'm actually impressed. I'm impressed that they speak English and that they can speak Russian and they can, I mean, there's plenty of guys that they're like, oh yeah, I actually know 4 languages. And you're like, Good for you.
I know one. If I tried to get anything out in a different language, you'd hang up on me. So
they have a lot of wrong information, you know, about the trucking industry over there in USA, you know, especially Europe people, you know.
Yeah.
They're asking how can I apply, you know, a lot of things they read, you know, and their people speak wrong.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
we've
Like
had
Vitaliy
such an
said.
overwhelming success with candidates that do fit the description of the caliber of drivers we're looking for, with those 10 years, with a clean driving record, with no significant accidents or injuries on the record, with no criminal backgrounds, that we have so many candidates in the process right now that we actually have a backlog of candidates. Currently, we're putting, you know, new candidates on a wait list. But any candidates that are in the US currently do not make it to the wait list. They get put to the front of the line. So
Yeah.
Actually,
And
I
how we've structured the program should give people comfort to know that it's not a scam. That's why all the guys that are overseas right now that we're working with, they're not paying us fees right now for the work. Now, they might pay for their own background and screening, they might pay for their medical exams and all those things, but that dollar isn't coming to us. So the fact that we're not charging them until they arrive in the US and start working, like, I hope that would allow people to know, like, oh, this company's not trying to scam people, because I'm not making any money until, well, in this case, 3.5 years later, right, for overseas guy. And we did the same thing with the employers. Like, the employers don't pay us a fee until the guy arrives and is working. Now, if you're in the States already and you're working right away, great, we can charge the fees right away. But I hope that would tell people, like, that we are a legitimate company that's doing things right, because we don't get paid until after you start working. And even then, we're expecting you to stay there 3 years, which should be also another indicator, because obviously we have to work with employers that are good enough that you're going to want to stay 3 years. So we're taking this big risk, and that I'm hoping is why people could trust us.
One more, I told Boyan and a couple guys from Serbia, I sneak it to some scammers companies like Miami and LA, who doing advertising. I cannot even see their face, right? I asked for the money, for everything. They asking me, like, I pretend I have a friend, CDL driver, who just arrived in the US. They're asking me to pay 10 grand upfront immediately, without signed contract, without speaking with HR manager, without even to see a face who I speak, right? They just send me where to go, the job offer without signature. So I say, guys, please be careful for the scammers, Latina scammers, some Russian scammers. All right. I say, my partners, I'm working. We have contract, we verify contracts, it's great, everything. We check at companies. Before I spoke with Chad, I check all these companies by DOL, which I have access, right? So this is all legit information. So you have a choice, right? And last 2 drivers, which you sent to me, CDL, they speak nicely English. I said, guys, keep doing. It's just more practice.
Yeah.
absolutely. And the fact that anybody that's going to be watching this video is going to be on the phone with me on video. So
so Jake, main.
Great. Well, good. I'm glad that we could have this discussion and let everybody know what's really going on with the program. It was a lot of information, and it's very difficult. It's easy for us because we go through it all the time. Like, it's a daily work for us. So for us to say, oh yeah, the 9089 form and the I-140 form, and we'll be working with NVC, like all these acronyms and things, like, if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm so confused because I don't know who we're working. Government agency
paperwork.
We can bring you through that. When we send out, like, the terms and conditions, we have an explanation of the program in writing. You know, we have now things on the family part. You know, how does the family part work for the travel? What are the costs? You know, we're trying to lay everything out in writing, in video, so that people can hear it, they can read it, and they can have everything to be able to review back. And obviously we're available for questions at any time.
Right. And I told you, Boyan, we have a calendar of Jack on our website, so anyone can plug in immediately and speak. But I'm asking at least to send the resume over email. for people who are already in the US, we need, of course, CDL driver and work authorization. This is a three piece what we're asking. CDL, work authorization card, right? Some drivers, they already file over paper and they get extension 150 days sometimes, right? We would like to see, and it's will be helpful for the JAG to move forward immediately with any partner tracking company. So again, 3 documents with resume. Some people calling us and say, Vitaliy, can you do resume for me? I say, no, no, no. I said, I have my American guy right here in Washington State who can do for you everything, but you have to pay him a little bit. And we have actually example of resume for diesel mechanics and for CDL on our website in English.
Yeah, also, yeah, for mechanic guys, is it any chance for them to hire?
There
them?
is. Yeah, the only thing is we have a lot more employers that are for trucking than we do have for mechanics. Like right now, we have one major employer that we're working with mechanics, and the reason for that is because when you take all the costs for doing the required advertising and all that stuff, a trucking company can say, well, I'll take 30 people, I'll take 100 people a year. A trucking company only needs maybe 1 or 2 mechanics, so now the costs per person is a lot more for all the lawyer fees. So the company that we're working with up in the Northeast, they're a bigger dealer, so they wanted 30 mechanics. It makes sense for them to spend the money. So that's the only kind of nuance that there could be. You know, if we were looking for one company for 1, 2 mechanics, the cost would be much higher for them, you know, individually. So,
But it's possible.
but it is possible.
Mhm.
Really, once we have an employer, any position is possible, right? You could do, you know, any kind of trade positions, all those things are possible as long as we have an employer who's looking for those jobs. The
Can you tell
ED
us?
program helps.
Can you tell us which position are available? Maybe safety, accounting, maybe something like that.
Right now, I don't have any employers for any of those positions. The only things that we have is CDL truck drivers, diesel mechanics, and we're also starting to work on nurses.
Nurses. Oh, okay, okay.
It's a whole different kind of ball game that we're just starting to go through. We just got our first nurse certified, her education certified 2 weeks ago, because there's a whole certification on whether your education is going to fit. So we're just going down that route now. So
That's maybe you can be interested.
We
Yeah.
have lots of nurses and doctors came as the refugees for you in Washington State. And our colleges are given a certificate 9 months free of charge for refugees.
oh wow,
So please explore to Washington State your service.
yeah, we'll have to talk about that more.
Vitaliy,
Well, gents,
for major.
I have lots of good friends at workforce development state of Washington, even for fishing company. Remember, I have so much calls from Odessa, Ukraine. I have a partner in Odessa on H2B for fishing. I say, call my partners, speak in English, please, not with me. This is not my area.
Go in Alaska, yeah.
Yeah, go in Alaska, yes.
this is
Nice
great.
to talk to you guys.
It was so great talking to everyone, and to everyone listening. We really hope that if there is an opportunity for us to help you out, we would really love to be able to do that. We have great employers, great systems, great programs, great people that you'd work with through the process. We're really excited about it.
Thank you for your time, guys.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Have a nice
All right,
day.
I actually do have to get going because I got to go drive somewhere right now. So it was really great. So I would love to follow up with a meeting or, you know, phone calls, email.